The Georgia 4x400 meter team set a new school record, and I've been getting some more recommendations to do 400-meter runs, so I thought it would be great to be able to break down all 4 of the 400-meter runs, really going into the specific mechanics behind running the 400-meter and getting technical into some of the main things that we saw within each of the runners, and maybe even getting a little bit into some of the other athletes that they were competing against. This is the newest edition of the Performance Lab. Reach your individual goals. You don't want to just talk about straight line speed. We also want to talk about your ability to be quick. We break down your video. Let's make you into the quarterback I know you can become. So what we had was Elija Godwin ran a 46.50. We had Matthew Boling ran a 44.60, absolutely flying. We had Cavanaugh run a 45.53, and we had Sumner run a 44.80. And again, altogether that was a 2:58.83. And that is the second all-time in collegiate history, only behind Florida, who last year they actually did 2:58.53. So not too far off. We're going to go ahead and get right into the breakdown here. We'll start with Elija in the first lane. He's in lane 3. Not a great start, right? See some things that can definitely improve within that spine angle, within that spine position. And the good thing with the 400 meter is that it's not as heavy on the start. I believe when running this, it's important to be able to get off well. So I think that first like 50 to 60 meters is good to be able to really set the pace when we're coming around the curve. So, you know, when you first get the baton, I think it's important to be able to be nice and quick. Or when you first start the race, you want to be nice and quick. And then on this part of the run, we really want to be, holding speed. We don't want to end up like slowing ourselves down, but really it's a focus on length. It's a focus on opening up. It's really a technique focus within that 100 meters. So from once you get past like the first 60 meters, get up to a good sprint, right? So we want to almost go like 100% for the first 60 meters. And this is my overall philosophy around this, my own coaching behind it. There's a ton of different ways to be able to do this. I don't want you to think that by watching this that you have to do it this way. I do think it's important though to have a strategy in order to run the best times that you can. And then for, I want to say probably the next 200 meters, it's really technique focused, right? So as much as we can do, maintaining good technique, staying nice and open, having a good arm swing, controlling the breathing, all those things are really important. I would say it's somewhere between a 92 to 98%, somewhere in there. And the reason I say that is because these percentages are a lot, right? Some people want to go into, oh yeah, 95% and 100% is only 5%, which is not very much. And at the end of the day, especially when you get into those upper percentages, 95% is a lot, right? So I would even say 92 might not be as good. It just kind of depends on the athlete and where they're at. But those elite level guys are much closer to like 95, maybe even 96 to 98% during that 60 to 260 the 60 meters until the 260. And then with that last 140 meters, we're going 100%. That ends up being my philosophy. We'll see some people that actually incorporate different philosophies when we go through here. So again, staying nice and open here. And then when we get this last curve, now we're starting to accelerate as we're going into the curve to be able to help us in being able to get to that top speed. Now it's important when we're running the curve, we're going and landing with the inside foot wants to be underneath the pelvis. It doesn't want to be too much on the outside here. Like when we're typically running, we want to be getting that foot right underneath the pelvis. And it's important to be able to maintain a good swing within that inside arm. We don't want to lessen our swing within that inside arm. And it's important when running in general to make sure we're getting plenty of back action within the legs. And really when we're getting in this last stretch, we don't want to end up shortening up that stride. We want to be able to reach. The big thing that I think is important when trying to understand and establish and really accomplish a great reach is being able to get those knees up nice and effectively, and also not wasting too much time with our foot back behind us, and instead being able to maximize our leg coming through. I would say with Elija here, he's landing a little bit too far back in his foot, and I would also say his spine position is a little bit too far back as he's going through. We're seeing a lot of sideways action in his movement pattern, right? He's moving a lot side to side. So he's very, very rotational, which is going to limit what we can do from a linear perspective down below. We know this when we look at the quarterback mechanics as well. So you're trying to maximize the hip rotation, which then makes it so we become more linear within the upper body. But what happens here is, if we end up being way too side to side here, what that does is that limits what we can do within our linear action in our legs and within that lower half. Able to understand that, I think, makes a big difference. And that's where guys like Matthew Boling does a really good job. And based off of this again, so you can see he gets it and immediately he accelerates, right? He has a hard acceleration phase. And, you know, now as he gets into that 60 meter, he starts to kind of calm down a little bit and really pick up the stride, get a good cadence going within his sprinting. And really the second leg a lot of times end up being the most important leg, or one of the most important legs. Really the second and the fourth end up being two most important. If you had to number it, obviously it's a team, so everybody ends up being important. But we could see like with this athlete here, we could see like it seems like he ends up going and trying to accelerate a little bit earlier on during the curve. So he tries to catch him early on, and then we almost see like the head movement here, where it's like once he gets to the scoreboard, Matthew Boling's like, okay, let's go, and uses that to be able to get into the turn there and really uses that acceleration. It looks like pretty well, right? He starts to accelerate, and I'm sure the more you can work on that curve, the better we can get an understanding of how to be able to run that in a way where you can accelerate out of that the best that you can, because we want to be able to maximize the acceleration out of that curve. So you want to be able to understand what works for you in order to make it so you can get a good amount of speed coming out of there, because you can see he does a great job pulling straight back. And notice, you know, a lot more just straight back motion with his body, which then allows him to be able to really get a lot of ground, pick up a lot of ground. He's very vertical within the step. He's a little bit far back within the leg. I mean, it's normal for us to see, especially in that last 400, people to get stuck with that foot a little bit further back behind. Typically, the turnover rate here is not nearly as fast, you know, especially when you're looking at 100 or 200 meter athletes, but we want to still be able to maintain our range. The big thing is when we see guys that really struggle here, it's because they end up not being able to get to the same range of motion within their foot contact and within their really lower body in general, which makes a big difference. And then we see, again, gets it, really, really good start. So you have to be able to understand how to accelerate well when getting out. And then as he goes here, now he starts to kind of allow himself to get into the curve and really starts to get into his cadence, starts to open up, you know, good open stride, good foot position, landing with the foot right back underneath. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can get into in terms of how we could potentially get better here in terms of the foot position and the leg position and things like that. I do like that knee being inside, so we can see as he's coming through, that knee is like right at the midline. And then as he comes through and strikes the ground, the foot's going more towards the outside, which is definitely an important thing to be able to understand and achieve. And then, so he ended up getting caught on that straightaway right there. And then we could see as they're going around the curve, he's able to hold off and then uses this curve to be able to accelerate well, right? So both guys really tried to use this curve to be able to try to get some degree of extra push, extra momentum. We can see that Caleb did a good job being able to use that to really accelerate. And again, a lot of upper body rotation here, which is going to limit what we could do in terms of hip flexion, right? He's still doing a good job of being able to maximize hip flexion, but we can see a lot less knee drive and a lot less effectiveness than we saw on that straightaway there as he was going through. And then we have the last leg here, and this ends up being an interesting leg because the acceleration and the athlete here, Will Sumner, is not as, he's more of an 800 meter guy. And we can see with his arms, he's a little bit overemphasizes his right arm swing back and doesn't get as much of an inside arm swing back just in general. Really long stride overall. So we see him end up getting taken in the first, 100 or maybe 200, right? So they're probably halfway right around here. You know, somewhere between probably 150 and 200. And then he ends up actually even getting taken by the UCLA athlete that was in third. And again, I mean, it just seems like when Will's doing this that he, I mean, looking at his face right here, it almost seems like he's a little panicked, you know, like he is worried about where he's at, even though when we obviously know that they ended up winning and you know, getting a big record. But we can see here, he's just sticking with the plan, and then now he starts to accelerate, right? So now he's like, okay, I got to really catch these guys. They're getting a little bit too far away. And he did a great job of being able to stick to his strategy, and now starts catching both these guys here. And you could tell, guy in the front, he had the strategy of really making a lot of ground in that 200 and was just going to try to muscle it through in that last half. You could tell he's really stressing here. Where again, Will is a 800-meter guy, so he's right on the UCLA guy's backside. So he went from being pretty far back and through here to then again going and saying, okay, let's go, and really started to accelerate. So by the time he got around the curve, really good job of being able to maximize that curve, and the acceleration out of the curve was able to come through. And what you got to love about Will here is he's just very consistent. You know, like his stride is pretty much the same as it was when he started with the movement. He's a little bit shorter in his arms, but he is not struggling at all when it comes to being able to maintain a good height within the knees. We can see, you know, like the guy from Alabama, his legs are going like nowhere now. If we go in and rewind it into, you know, when he's on this side and how nice of a leg height he has, right? We can even maybe get an angle here. So you can see they're at, you know, that femur's at about a 26-degree angle, 19-degree angle. And then when we get closer to the finish, Will closer to 29, where he was at, what, it was like 19, I want to say. So about 10 degrees difference. And then now we got down into 37. Both of them ended up decreasing, obviously, but Will's doing a much better job overall and just being able to maintain good position with the knees, and ended up winning the race because of that, right? So excellent job of being able to have a strategy, stick to the strategy, and ended up running a great time. 44.80 is a really, really good time to be able to run that 400 meter. And I really love the 400 meter, and there's a lot of guys that I work with in person here that actually run the 400 meter, and I think that the curve ends up helping out with that a lot, just because, you know, it really teaches you that good knee height, that good leg height, and also is something that is very tiring to be able to run on and be able to sustain running on, which when you correlate that into the sprints, it carries over very, very well, or at least it has carried over very well with the athletes that I work with in terms of their ability to maintain their top speed. So I love the 400 meter race just because I think it's something where you really have to have great mechanics. You can't be off with your mechanics in order to really maximize your performance within the 400. So, you know, it's one of those things where the better you understand how to be able to run, the more effective strategies you have, the more effective you are able to train your body and push your body, and the mental side of it, right? The 400 meter is one of those things where, you know, it's enough where you need to have some gifts, some genetics. You're still running at a high rate, but it's also enough where you can really train to be good at the 400 as well. So it's one of those things where it's a little in between. Like the 100, it's a little bit where you have to be very fast twitch type of a guy in order to have like the right start and the right acceleration and drive phase, things like that, in order to run a great 100. But the 400 meter, you can really train yourself to be able to get, I think, really, really good at it with the right understanding of what to do and how to be able to do it. So as always, guys, if you like the information, click that thumbs up down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, if you haven't watched one of my videos before. I really do a lot of breakdowns with top sprinters, but I'm going to start doing more 400 meters. So if you're interested in learning more about the 400 meter, I'm going to start doing that more because, again, I've been having more guys run the 400 meter and want to just give you a better understanding of how to be effective with running and just having good mechanics, good sprinting mechanics, good running biomechanics, how to train, what are good strategies to be able to use during the curve, during the straight, and really just be able to improve overall as a sprinter. And I always tell guys too, like, it's not only about sprint development, it's just about development in general. Like, how can you become better at pushing yourself and understanding leadership and really just showing up for yourself? And I think that ends up being more important than anything, right? If you can understand and start building the right habits that are going to take you through not only your high school career, college career, professional career, whatever, but really understanding what are the key traits that are needed in order to succeed in anything is really what I tried to aim to do within even this channel, is really be able to showcase the consistency and the discipline and what it takes to be able to succeed and continue to show up for yourself. And I continue to show up for, you know, this business and you guys, to make it so you guys have all the tools to be able to succeed at the highest level. If you guys want to check out more about some of our programs and some of the things that we offer, you can check the description down below. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.